Hey everybody, Bearded Rogue here. Going up late again seems to be the trend. I've been working really long days at work, so that's part of what's going on as far as why the videos are late. It is what it is. I figure as long as I get a video up for every day, I've still succeeded, even if the video didn't go up early in the day. So, yeah, so we're gonna keep going like we're going. We're almost there. We're approaching the tail end of the month now. So today I was asking around for suggestions on what to record, and my wife made a suggestion that I think is fitting for this vlog, and is something that I've touched on in a couple of places but haven't really talked about at length, and that's um, kind of my transition from role-playing games to board games. So to go into the Wayback Machine, I played my first role-playing game in my AIT, my Advanced Individual Training unit, with a couple of the other soldiers that I was stationed with that were in my class. We were doing signals intelligence analysis, and it was a really hard course, but that meant that pretty much everybody there was super intelligent, and lots of them had really nerdy interests, even though we were all army people. So I'd already been interested in role-playing games. I'd been very interested in a lot of the World of Darkness stuff, D&D. When I was younger, I actually had some second-hand copies of old D&D stuff. I very distinctly remember that I had a copy of the Isle of Dread adventure, and I used to read through it all the time and look at all the pictures and stuff, and I had no idea how the game was played, didn't care, didn't have anybody who was exposing me to it. I just really liked reading through monster manuals and rules manuals and stuff like that. Imagine that, me liking looking at rules and manuals and such. So that was really my first game that I played in. We played a couple of weekends and then never really picked it up, but I had gotten the bug at that point. So I picked up Mage the Ascension, I picked up Hunter the Reckoning, and several other White Wolf titles. 3.0 D&D was what was currently out, and I had all sorts of problems with the rules mechanisms that existed in 3.0. So when 3.5 launched, I was really happy because it fixed a lot of my major issues with 3.0. And then played several games of 3.5 in various things. I ran campaigns in various settings. Eberron was really big around the time I started running campaigns. So had a lot of campaigns set in Eberron. I love that world. I ran a gigantic campaign on the continent of Sarlona in that world, which was all psionics. I love psionic stuff, and at that point I got interested in Dream Scarred Press. Dream Scarred Press originally was an indie publisher for the D&D 3.5 system. They're now the hottest name in psionics for the Pathfinder system. They didn't follow Wizards of the Coast to 4th edition because all of the new license agreements and stuff for third-party publishers were way too restrictive in 4th edition, and kind of pushed the third-party publisher people over to Pathfinder. And so Pathfinder never had to do their own psionics. Instead, Dreamscarred did them all for them and did an amazing job. I still have most of their books in PDF format. I stopped collecting them shortly after they released their campaign setting. Not because they're not still awesome, but because I didn't continue on into Pathfinder. 3.5 was really bloated, really munchkiny, really rules lawyery, and was really annoying. So I made the transition to 4. I absolutely loved 4th edition D&D. I'm one of those people. 5th edition is pretty cool too. I like both of them better than 3.5, so you know, take that what you will. But my transition away from 3.5 D&D kind of led me to other indie games. The first one that I really got heavily into was The Riddle of Steel, which is a very, like, historical European martial arts inspired combat system around a motivation based leveling system. And it was where I was first introduced to the Forge forums online with all the other indie people. And I saw a lot of really neat games there. Universalis was pretty cool. Sorcerer, various other things, all sorts of other things. The indie RPG world is gigantic. So I got into indie RPGs and stuff like that and kind of messed around with those, but couldn't get anything really to stick as far as playing them. D&D was really the only thing that I could play, because any of the indie RPGs that I wanted to play, I had to run. At that point, we moved away from Florida, and our play group down in Florida up to Cincinnati here. That was about 8 years ago, and role-playing just kind of died. For about a year after we were here, maybe 2 years, we played online occasionally. We played some Rifts online, if you can believe that. We played Don't Rest Your Head, which was really good online. We played All Flesh Must Be Eaten, which was really good online. We played a couple of campaigns here and there that were pretty good, but eventually that kind of died off as well. One of our players was in the military and had to go to school to move up in his career path, and ended up going to Korea and all sorts of stuff, and the hours wouldn't work, and then I had a kid, and life all changed. But about the time the role-playing games started fizzling out for me, I started getting into board games. I heard about Pandemic, and I purchased Pandemic. This was still when I was living in Florida, and really, really loved it. And then some of my friends introduced me to some other games like Race for the Galaxy, which was pretty cool. One of my friends got heavily into Descent 1.0, including the Road to Legend campaign, and we would come over and play Descent anytime the role-playing games would fall through. Like if half the group wasn't showing up, we would just play a game of Descent instead. And so I started getting into board games at that point. Board games, card games, various things like that. I'd already been into the Game of Thrones collectible card game when I lived up in Virginia, but it was really the only board game I was into. It was a CCG at the time. I didn't follow the transition to LCG first edition, so I still have like a 4-row box of all of my old CCG cards, but I was into it pretty heavily. I played primarily Baratheon and Greyjoy. I liked winning via power or winning through unopposed challenges, which is also technically winning through power. I really loved the scene. The people in it were awesome. LCGs really fit my lifestyle. I was used to role-playing games, especially the D&D world, where there was a splat book every month. So you'd go out and buy your book for the month and read it. Well, in this case, I would go out and I'd buy my, buy my pack for the month. But that's the LCG model, which I didn't start getting into until Netrunner. The CCG model was you go and buy cases and cases and cases of packs and open it up and hope you get what you want, and then trade with everybody. And that model was very not sustainable. Living in Virginia and being involved in a CCG really just didn't work financially, and eventually that fell through. So when I got to Florida and discovered board games that weren't like throwing money down a hole every quarter, I was overjoyed and started getting pretty heavily into them down there. But it wasn't until we got up to Kentucky here that I actually started being board games as my primary. Like there were on this shelf, there are maybe, I don't know, 10, 20 of the games that are on this shelf that made the transition or the move up here from Florida to the Cincinnati area. Everything else on the shelf is newer than that, has been acquired since that. I shouldn't say newer. Some of it's older than that, but it's been acquired since then. So last 8 years or so, probably the last 6-ish years for a lot of it. But yeah, board gaming kind of became my thing, and there are a couple of reasons why. Number one, what they don't tell you about being an adult is that your schedules are never going to coordinate with other adults. There's just, everybody has too much going on. Like, even when I was in the Army, we could coordinate schedules for like 1 day a week. As adults, especially now adults with children, coordinating schedules is like pulling teeth. Like, if it's not a permanent routine thing on the calendar, it just doesn't happen. So like, the only time I really play board games is Wednesday nights, because Wednesday night is a standing known thing that every Wednesday night Tony's going to go to the game store and play board games. There's no question about it. There's no awkwardness around it. I don't have to schedule with anybody, and anybody else who shows up will be who I play games with. So that's another big part of it. Not just the scheduling, but the fact that I can play board games with pretty much anybody who shows up. So if 3 people don't show up, my plot isn't wrecked. I could still play a game with the one person that does. Board games play with a broader number of players, usually fewer. So in my early board gaming days, a lot of 2-player games were what I acquired, simply because 2 players is really easy to come by when you're one of them. But yeah, that's kind of scheduling, and you know, who was going to show up, and the amount of time I have to spend learning a system. Role-playing games, especially if you're running them, require hours outside of the game in order to be proficient at it, or be prepared for it, or to have everything you need. And I don't have to do that with board games. Board games, I can spend, you know, a little bit of time reading the rule book, or watching a Rodney Smith video on Watch It Played, or you know, watch a Rotto run through and pay attention to all the annotations about where he screwed up, so that I actually get the rules. And it's pretty easy to learn it and then teach it. My day job is IT stuff, but my primary function in my job is to learn new systems, and then write standard operating procedures, and then teach those standard operating procedures to people who are less technically proficient than myself. So learning board game rules and then teaching people how to play is right up my alley. It's something that I just do. And I love doing it. I love learning new systems, and each board game is a new system. And that's what got me interested in game design, is learning systems behind board games. And you know, that's really kind of where it all started, is just not having enough time for role-playing anymore, not being able to schedule time with other adults to do role-playing anymore, not being able to set aside a 4-hour block of time. Like, I sometimes can do that, but with a board game, if I schedule a 4-hour block of time, I get all excited because I get to play one of my bigger games. You know, if it's role-playing games, oh, it's only 4 hours, we may get through one combat if it's D&D. You know, it's just kind of the way it kind of shook out. Like, I'm a role player who plays board games primarily because that's what works and fits in my life, and I love board games because they've given me so many different ways to express the same kind of ideas and creativity. And game design has allowed me to continue to express a lot of the creativity and stuff that I did when I was running games, or when I was creating role-playing game characters. So that's kind of where my love for design comes from. And it's all because of role-playing games, really. Board games came second, and they've become a wonderful substitute.
That's a really good plan.
I guess the last thing I could say about board games versus role-playing games is that I still like role-playing games. I still would love to engage in role-playing games, but the realities of life have made that extremely difficult. So Board games are probably what it's going to be for the foreseeable future, but every now and then I'll come across something like Worldwide Wrestling that's so cool that I absolutely have to be involved, or Tech Noir, which I absolutely love. And so role-playing games are not dead from my life. They're just not my central focus anymore in my gaming hobby. Video games kind of followed the same kind of progression. I haven't had a console since the PS2. My PC is a laptop that can't run most high-end games. I'm not looking to change either of those facts anytime soon. Uh, I can live without most of those games. I still try to keep up with what's going on, or be familiar with it. YouTube and Twitch and Let's Plays have kind of become my saving grace. Most of the time what I was interested in was in seeing what was around the next corner anyway, so letting somebody else who's more dexterous with the controls manage that while I get to ride along with them is absolutely perfect for me. So, yeah, that's pretty much it. That's kind of like where my transition happened, or how my transition happened from one kind of gamer into another, and now I'm the board gamer that you all know. So yeah, that's it for today. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you guys tomorrow.